Okay, having a quorum, I'd like to open the ABR for August 9th, 2010. And we'll start with general business. Anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the board on an item not on the agenda? Seeing no one, I'll close that portion. Bring it back to the approval of minutes for the ABR of July 26th, 2010. And can I have a motion to open those minutes up?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Paul first, second by? Second by Clay. Anything before item 1? Item 1. Item 2. 3. 4. 5. 6. And 7. And I have something on item 7. Number 3 of the motion. I think that the last word there where it says provide detailed information on the plans for how the parapet top will return, provide elevation details on how the parapet will move. I think we should strike the word move and add be remodeled. And then on number 7, provide a rear elevation. I'd like to scratch the word for and put and any necessary details to show and the scope of work presented. Thank you. And that's it for the main agenda. All those in favor? Say aye. Against? Motion carries. 1 abstention by Gary. So we go on to the consent calendar, minutes for August 2nd, 2010. Motion to open those minutes. First by Clay and Gary second. Go ahead, Tony.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. For the consent calendar last week, we had item A, 1921 Bath Street, was continued 1 week. And item B, 402 South Hope Avenue, got a final approval of the architecture, and the landscaping was continued 1 week. Consent last week was reviewed by Gary Mosel and Chris Gilliland.
Thanks. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Against? Motion carries. Motion to open the August 9th consent minutes. First by Gary, second by Clay.
All right, consent calendar for today, August 9th. We had item A, 1921 Bath Street, got a final approval with conditions. 333 Consuelo Drive was continued to the staff hearing officer. Item C, 900 Calle de los Amigos, got a final approval with a condition. And item D, 402 South Hope Avenue, got a final approval as submitted of the landscaping. And consent today was reviewed by Gary Mosel and Chris Gilliland.
Thank you. All those in favor of the minutes say aye. Aye. Against? Motion carries. Okay, that brings us to item D, announcements, requests for applicants for continuances and withdrawals, future agenda items and appeals.
Staff doesn't have any announcements.
Okay. Other than Keith will not be here today, and we think Dawn will not be. Right?
We heard from Keith, but we did not hear from Dawn.
Okay. All right. Subcommittee reports? Any subcommittee reports? No? And that brings us to the first item of the evening, 500 Fowler Road, Santa Barbara Airport. And you're up. Hi, Fred.
Hi. Hey, everyone. Yeah, he's got the same copies. These are not folded, but a little easier to look at. Is this on? Is that on? Okay. Fred Sweeney, representing HNTB PMSM Architects for the airport terminal. And I'm here today, along with Karen Ramsdale, the airport director, to submit a concept idea for the inclusion of a piece of what we're calling an art commemorative project for a period in which the U.S. Marines occupied the air base during World War II. Some of you may know, Karen has been very active in making sure that art was incorporated into this project, and we have 3 major pieces of art that have been commissioned on the interior of the airport, and this is the first new piece. There'll be some additional or existing artwork that will be moved from the old terminal into this new area that will be external. Some of you are very familiar with that, the time clock, or the Kachink machine, as I like to call it. And the albatross and some other existing art pieces will be moved over. But this is the first new one. And so this is an idea that we've been working with the Claysons Foundation, who has stepped forward and requested that an art piece be placed into the terminal that would allow commemoration of the period in which the Marines occupied our city airport in World War II. And so we looked at various ways to do this in terms of space and size and so forth, and came with a recommendation that a piece on the exterior of the terminal would be most appropriate. And so what we're proposing is this concept of using what I'm calling glass flags, which would align a portion of the exterior walkway adjacent to the historic terminal, which, as you know, is being moved over to a position in front of the new air terminal, and using the larger plan here. So it's along this walkway that we're talking about here. And the idea is to create a steel stanchion, so to speak, that would hold what we're calling these glass flags. And we're looking at some technologies, a couple of ways to do that, and I'll pass out some samples. Part of the idea came from the fact that there is a artist, and I don't have multiple copies of this piece of example, but an artist at the SeaTac Airport in Seattle who created on glass commemorative artwork that was displayed in their terminal. It's in that case backlit and on the inside of the terminal, and it depicts the historic nature of the Northwest area. So that's a product or a technology that uses glass to laminate the artwork. We're also looking at other technologies. This is an example of a man-made product, and I've got a couple of examples. Pass those out. Where the artwork is laminated into an acrylic type or polychrome type material. And so the idea is that piece would be placed in here. Now the actual artwork, the actual content of what I'm calling these seven flags would be subject to a artist RFQ process and selection process similar to the ones we've used to select the 3 artists that are working on the interior of the airport. And so the Claysons Foundation has agreed to fund that process and fund, obviously, the selection of the artist and then the execution of the actual installation. So that's a very quick overview. Here's one copy if people like to look at. That's the technology they use to do the glass component. This happens to be the artist that did the work at SeaTac utilized a glass studio that does this work in Germany. We're not quite sure that's what we'll do yet, but that's the idea and the concept. And I have other material that can share with you if you need that. But essentially, that's where we are, and we'd certainly like your comment, input, and so forth today. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Fred. Just bring back for anyone, no public comments slips. Any letters, Tony?
We do have a public comment letter from Paula Westbury.
Okay. Thanks very much. And I bring back to the board for questions. Gary?
Mr. Chair, thank you. Where you're proposing to place these flags, are you proposing some hardscape changes for that? So a viewing area for that, or?
No, not really. There'll be a slight modification to the approved landscape plan, but these will be well in view. And if you look at the next sheet, you can see in the perspective sketch, they're going to be lit at night. We're proposing to light these at night, and there's two technologies that would allow us to explore that. One is a fairly simple methodology where we put a landscape light down in the landscaping and the light would shine up onto the flags. There's another technology that would allow us to do it with an LED light system between the layers of glass so it actually glows at night. We're assuming, and based on the process we'll go through selecting artists, that it's not going to be a detailed piece of art that one has to walk up and see within a few inches. The idea is to tell the story in such a way that within a few feet as you pass through and walking by, you can kind of get the gist of the idea of the significance of the Marines being here during World War II.
Paul? Thanks, Gary.
If we go back to the site plan, I have a question. Following up on Gary's side, this is where the base is that touches the ground and the glass piece cantilevers. Do you have any visions of taking this hardscape so that people can step in this area? Or do you specifically have it so that people won't be putting their nose right in front of it 2 inches away?
Yes, and we did that because there is some maintenance and abuse problems. So, the idea is you can visually see it. That's basically a 2 or 3 foot distance or 5 foot distance, as it were. But there's no probably need to actually walk up and touch it, so to speak.
Okay.
Thanks, Clay.
Mr. Chair, I'm sure you've already looked at this, but are there any UV issues? Or are these things going to fade over time?
That's part of the selection of material process. We understand from talking with the glass manufacturer that supposedly that's not a problem for their particular product, but I'm trying to get data on the impact resistance problem that you can imagine if one uses glass. On the other hand, this material is material that supposedly is impact resistant, but I haven't gotten the answer back from the manufacturer yet on the UV factor. Supposedly that won't fade, but we want to make sure before we go down any specific road we have material in hand.
Leave it out on your porch for a few weeks and see what happens.
Right.
Chris?
That was going to be one of my questions, was the impact and safety. I'm also kind of curious, do you happen to have the landscape plan with you? I'm wondering what the planting scheme is.
It's this drawing up here on the right. And I don't have the working drawing planting plan.
Okay.
We have, what isn't shown in this plan, there is a tree that's on the actual final plan that's right here, and this tree on the lower piece has got to be moved over a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right here.
And then there's a tree right here. So we just have to move that tree just a bit to make this all work.
So has there been an approved final planting plan done?
Yes.
Or, there is.
That's
So,
already in.
so we have it somewhere.
Mm-hmm. That's on file, yes.
Okay. Tony, do we have a copy of that here?
I can go get it for you.
Okay. I just want to make sure that it's not agaves or something that people are going to walk up to and get spiked.
No. Yeah, it's that low grass material
Okay.
that's in between all those. So we have to rearrange that just a little bit.
I think it's fine, Tony. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I had just 2 questions. Have you, is this the final resolution of how this walkway enters this with the patterns
Yes.
that's going on here?
That was what was approved when we went through the ABR, yes.
Okay. I wondered if there's some study could go on with these kind of confluences that are happening in here. I mean, walking right into the middle there is... Anyway, that's one question. The other is, it seems to me, I mean, I like the concept. It seems to me that when you stand very close here, from here, this one is not too bad. It seems that you're always looking at that screen from, at least 20, 30 degrees angle, and you never get to see that screen from straight on or close to straight on unless you actually stand here and right at this edge. So as you walk along, you if you're in the middle here, you're virtually seeing that at a 45-degree angle from the middle of the walkway.
Now, keep in mind, these are viewed from both directions because they're transparent.
Yeah.
So if you're walking this way, you're looking at it.
Okay, so, and the same thing would happen here then. I mean, you're seeing it 45 degrees here. I mean, the first view here, this one probably you're seeing straight on, but here you're always, from that center, you're still 45 degrees. And is that an effective line for you?
We think that is. The idea is not any one panel will tell the whole story. It's this whole collective idea of the panels. And the other thing to keep in mind is because of the nature of this particular project, it's an airport. So for most part, people are either coming or going, and they're in some kind of time sequence, fairly busy. So it's unlike an art museum where art is sat there to be complimented and looked at in some detail, like we go to our own museum. This art is to be captured in kind of it's almost like driving along the freeway. So if you think about looking at architecture when you drive along the freeway, certain buildings have impact when you see them out of your corner of your eye. So that was the idea here. So it's really all 7 flags tell the story, not any one singular flag. And that's the challenge we're going to give to the artist. I mean, I'm not opposed to moving the walkway out, but the concept was it's not the type of art you need to sit and contemplate.
Mr. Chair, another quick question.
Yeah.
Are these mainly images, or are there text on these panels?
We're not sure yet. That's part of what we saw. If you saw in the examples that were passed around, and this is the one in Arkansas, you'll notice that most of it's visual images, but there is a couple of those, I thought, that had dates on them or some text. But again, the idea is to see this kind of general overview.
So it won't be like detailed writing. And
there's not. The intent is not to have a detailed set of writings. There may ultimately be a small plaque somewhere at the beginning or the end that might explain what who gave and funded the project and what it's meant to cover, but that has yet to be decided.
And which one is the beginning and which is the end?
Well, the idea is there is no beginning and no end because you're going to see it from both ways.
Right.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Chair. I'll come back to you, Paul. Gary?
I was going to go comment, so we're going comment.
Not yet. I think Paul has a question.
7 flags. Could there be 5? Could there be 6? Or 7's a magic number for a reason?
A 7 just because it looked like it worked with the length of the walkway and the area we had to work. Now, whether it ends up 5 or 6, that's probably something we can negotiate with the artist. But we thought, just given this distance to that distance, and given how we had already patterned this walkway is already patterned like that, it just seemed to make sense that worked quite nicely.
Mr. Chair, I had one quick
more
question.
question?
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
The location, was that determined by the Clayson Foundation, or
No, we looked at 3 or 4 locations about the outside of the terminal. They originally asked to look in the inside of the terminal, and we've kind of, because of the 3 major art pieces that are going in now, the 4th element of bringing over the Channing Peak mural, Fiesta mural, I don't know if you know about that. That's a fairly large piece. That's going to be in the inside of the terminal next to the escalators. We're trying to save room for art that will transition in and out of the terminal, et cetera. So we were kind of running out of space on the inside to do things. So we started again to look at the outside, in addition to bringing over the current art, 3-dimensional art that the airport now has in place, bringing over those pieces. We thought that the exterior would be best. So we looked at 3 or 4 locations on the exterior, and of those 3 or 4, working with the Clayson's Foundation and the Visual Arts Committee, we settled in on this recommendation of this piece of the site.
Okay, Gary?
Mr. Chair?
So back to comments.
Thank you. I like the concept. I like the concept of walkable art and art that's available for the general public. I do have some. I do like the way it looks very Santa Barbara with the ironwork, and the proportions look correct. What I am having a few issues with is that someone's not going to walk up to it. People just do. There's art, people walk up to it. There's landscaping here, so it's just going to get trampled. So I don't think that overall will work. I think that it needs either some type of hardscape or some type of gravel or something that's going to be there that people can walk up to it and won't be a maintenance situation. Even the picture that you've given us here on the center plan, it's depicted with somebody standing right in front of it. So I think that that's probably a possibility. The other thing that I'm a little bit concerned about, and I don't know if you have brought this up, but there's a problem with people wanting to deface public property. And one of the things that happens is people get out these little etching pens and they want to grind their name in something. And I would be afraid that might happen to this.
That's why we're looking at this material.
And that would be a concern of mine. And I noticed that all of the art that you have shown seems to be up high out of the general public's way. So that would be something that I would have a concern with, and the visibility of it. So those are my comments.
Thanks. Paul? Thanks, Gary.
Following up on Gary, I completely concur with the idea of adding some type of material, whether it's flagstone or aggregate or even concrete, but a different color paving pattern in this area. I think it's very important. The point that I sense is that there's too many flags, and that's because you don't get to see all of the flags kind of either at once or kind of in a row. It's what Chris was saying and what is shown in this photograph. And when we go to even our own harbor, you can line up in a certain line and you get all the flagpoles. But then as you bend, you can start seeing all the flags and it creates like a linear thing. And I never get that opportunity here because I feel like there's too many here. And even with these, the way you can see these all line up, you see each one of the images. It'd be nice to see all of the fancy artwork in each one of these flag panels. So I feel like there should be 5 or 6. There's too many here because you can't really sense what's happening in all these because this other guy blocks its view no matter where you move. So to me, I think that's another issue that has to be tackled.
Thanks, Paul. Clay?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I will comment. I agree with most of what's been said. I think there are good points. For me, this goes back to a long time ago reviewing this project. The locations, this seems like a tertiary pathway at best, so the location seems like, hopefully it does get noticed, but you've been through that issue with everybody involved, and I wouldn't be able to tell you where I think a better location is given what I'm looking at today. Just to comment on a couple other things, I think the spacing could be a problem, and I think you mentioned there's another tree sort of in the western portion where the path hits the larger path of around the terminal. So I think showing where these trees are is important and how it interfaces with this proposal. The other part for me is looking at what types of images they are. Are they going to be black and white? Are they going to be sepia? Are they going to, what kind of feeling is that going to be? And then the last is related to lighting. I don't think uplighting is the best way to do it. If you can get them to glow, albeit not overpoweringly, but if we can get them to glow, edge lighting it with LED, I think that would be a nice appearance for those things, so there isn't something in the landscaping that eventually gets either overgrown or trampled or it stops working. So those are my comments.
Thanks, Clay. Chris?
I was going to say the same about the lighting. I think the LED option would be better. I also think it'd be nice to see a little more information regarding the landscape plan and how this is integrated into the landscape and what the planting actually is surrounding it. In terms of the hardscape, I think what I would do is to basically push that line of the sidewalk out towards the posts of these flags. I think adding another type of hardscape there would look sort of tacked on, and adding another material just to me doesn't make sense. So I think if you just widened that sidewalk almost to the point of where the posts are, that'll give you the opportunity for people to sort of intermingle with these flags. And I think that's pretty much it for my comments.
Okay, I think for me, I think that we've made some good points. The lighting is definitely one that I'd like to see developed and have more of a finality to the design, because I think the uplighting would be, it probably is not the best solution. I think especially at the airport, having the uplighting is could be problematic. I am particularly concerned about the confluence of the walkway in this area here, how this transitions into this and the pattern, how that works. I think that there's some study that could go on there. I think the project certainly is a good project, but I do think that the way it's designed right now, the proximity of them, I think that the experience going through here is not a full experience. I think really people cannot walk and actually experience it to the fullest extent. They would actually have to come, stop, and then bend their head in to really get a good feeling of what this is. So it's either a spacing issue, or it's the way it's designed in this arc that's going to decide how that's viewed. But I think really the design as it is now coming off of here, only allowing for a 45-degree view of it before you actually get cut off by the next one, I think is problematic. I'm a little worried about coming inside of here I don't know how that plays with ADA, where the walkway comes into each one, but that would be something that you would look at. And so that's it. For me, the hardscape, the lighting, and the layout to be able to experience it fully. Project, certainly the location of it is, I'm neither here nor there on that. I think that you probably have challenges with trying to locate this, and I wouldn't know where a better location would be, and so I can't really think of that one. Otherwise, I mean, I think they're well designed. It's just the layout, I think, is a little bit problematic. Okay, so that's where we are.
I do have one clarification.
Yes.
The actual content of because someone mentioned whether it's black or white or color or whatever.
Yeah.
The actual content is going to be subject to the Visual Arts Committee as they go through that
Sure.
process.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Okay, could we? Yep.
I have a question of the applicant. The spacing and determining the spacing, will that be determined
Can you
before
leave a
you
set of
hire
these
the
to
artist, or do
Victoria?
your RFP for the artist? I'm sorry. The spacing of the flags, should that, if ABR has a concern that there might be too many or something, should that be ironed out prior to getting the artist involved, or that doesn't really pertain to, or get the artist's opinion also before you decide if it's going to be 5, 6, or 7 flags?
Well, I think I'm looking to you all to give us some guidance on that. My vision of this thing is obviously a little bit different than how you've all looked at it in terms of the ability to see this thing, because it's a transparent piece of artwork. Now, can they tell the story in 5? Can they tell the story in 7? I don't know. I would prefer to be able to work that out with the artist before we came back to you, but I don't know how you want us to proceed. So I'm kind of looking to you for guidance.
I think you're going to have to work with the artist to know what's your minimum amount. I think what we've heard from the board here generally is that there is a problem with being able to experience each one of these fully. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the key elements that we would like you to work with your artist on. The other is lighting, and the other is the walkway confluence. there would be issues, as Gary said, with graffiti and marking, but I think we'll leave those to you to, I mean, it's a general concern of everything that we have down at that level, and
Right,
we'll
absolutely.
really leave that in your hands. We're just kind of voicing that so that you'd be aware. Anything else? Am I missing something? So are you
Okay.
comfortable with that
No,
guidance?
I'm comfortable with that. So I would assume then we would only come back to you after we've been able to select an artist and work out the sequence and the details and the lighting and so forth.
I think that sounds sensible. I don't think we could go much further with the.
And what we're trying to do with the artists is just give them guidance on what our requirements are for vandal resistance, graffiti, impact, so forth and so on. We're going to give the artists some guidelines about what we expect, and then they'll have to pick out the material they want to work in. So if they want to work in this and come back and convince us that it meets all those criteria,
Sure.
then that would be the way we approach it.
Certainly, yeah. Okay, so can I have a motion? Somebody?
I'll take a strike out of here.
Thanks, Clay.
Continue indefinitely to the full board. The following comments. Number 1, provide more information regarding LED or edge lighting for the flags. Is that what we're calling them, flags? Is that fine? Okay. Number 2, study widening the sidewalk or providing viewing areas between the panels. Number 3, study reducing the number of flags to provide an experience, a walking experience. Number 4, provide a revised landscape hardscape plan in this area for review by the board. I think that's all I got.
Do you have a second? Second by Chris. Under discussion, I just wondered if we could proceed the number 2 and number 3, which relates to the study going in the middle and study making few of them, proceeded with something like in an attempt to increase the visual impact of each panel, something like that. You study or use the following 2 comments. Or
Yeah, that's fine. I don't have an issue with that.
okay, so just before number 2 or 3, in an attempt to increase the visual clarity and impact of the individual panels, we suggest the following 2 items. And 2 and 3 would come under that. Okay, so all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Against? Motion carries.
Great.
Thank you. Thanks. Did you leave those copies that I had here? The photographs? Yeah. We need to leave a set with the... Okay. So, Tony, you just have to get a copy of those photographs that were presented, those images that were presented. Just keep a copy of those, okay? Item number 2, 1032 East Mason Street. These are Fred. These are yours, Fred.
Green light, Nicole. Backpacking.
Should be the same.
So your last meeting was here in February, 8th of February. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I'll just read the minutes here. Continued indefinitely to full board, provide photographs of the surrounding properties, specifically to the south and west, include the adjacent parcels and building footprints on the site plan. The board expressed concerns regarding the modifications for open yard space and the front yard setback. The board encourages the applicant to study ways to reduce the number of requested zoning modifications. Study opportunities for adding additional windows to the living room. Consider eliminating the plaster box, the box out pattern. Generally, the site plan is acceptable and the architecture is heading in an appropriate direction. The two board members requested the applicant study the use and appropriateness of the two-story column architectural features or pilasters, which could be exacerbating the mass of the project. Okay, thanks. All
Want
right.
us to introduce ourselves?
Yes, please, go right ahead.
Lisa Plowman. I'm with Piker Group, and I'm participating as the planner to help them through the process. It's an affordable housing project under state density bonus.
Okay. Excuse me a sec. Tony,
Bill.
can you have the last submission available to Clay and Chris? Thanks. And a copy of the minutes too, if you can. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, my name is Bill Spencer. I'm the architect for the project. And we feel that we have addressed the concerns in our last meeting. What we've done, one of the comments too, I don't know if it was written, that the trash enclosure is very close to the side yard. We had it over here on this side yard. We've moved it since to more into the center of the site and with a little bit of landscaping around it. The other thing is that we've addressed a minimum now modifications. They're very minor relating to the bicycles racks at the front yard, and the second one is the open area, open space.
There are actually three concessions that we're requesting under state density bonus and 4 modifications.
3 modifications, right?
Well, we have 4.
4?
Yeah, we do. I'm sorry. No, we have 2.
You have 2
sorry,
mods.
Sorry, 2.
Okay. And you're requesting it. You've gotten anything back from staff on it as yet?
Yeah, we have communication from staff that they support our requests in general.
Okay. And the 2 are? Just go ahead.
Mr. Chair, so under state density bonus law, the applicant's essentially entitled to 3 different concessions and incentives, and one of those is to have a 6-unit apartment building in the R2 zone, and staff has reviewed that request and discussed it with the city attorney's office and actually supports that request. The other 2 concessions and incentives that are being requested right now are reduction in parking for both for the church use, and staff's discussing this request with the applicant and would more like to see this as a modification request than something that comes under state density bonus. But the project right now, from staff's understanding, meets the parking demand of both the church and the apartment units, and there were parking counts that were done specifically for the church too recently. And the other concession that was requested is for parking in the front setback on Voluntario. The Planning Commission approvals include a conditional use permit for the church. Currently there's a duplex that's attached to the church. The bottom unit of the duplex would be converted into church use, and the top apartment would stay, and then the 6 additional apartments would be added. Also, the Planning Commission will be considering a development plan for that conversion to non-residential square footage, and the 2 other modifications would be the setback modification along Mason Street to allow bicycle parking in the non-residential front setback, and then an open yard modification to provide private outdoor living space consistent with the R3, R4 zones instead of the R2 zones. And in considering the type of project that's being proposed, staff believes that request is reasonable and supports that modification currently.
Okay, thanks. Is that open yard mod? Is that in that area?
And each unit has 120 square feet of private space.
And they're also providing the 15 by 15
Common space.
common space area, and then the 10% that isn't clearly shown on the plans is currently.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Nothing else. Well, let's talk a little bit about the. I don't know if we went over it last time, but part of this project is to solve the accessibility problem that the church now experiences, and we've done that with a series of ramps and placed a handicapped stall in the front, easy access, so that both the fellowship hall and the existing sanctuary will have access from both people walking from the public way and from the handicap stall. There will be some minor adjustments to the rear for handicap accessibility because there's a difference in elevation within the fellowship hall. So we want to make, once the wheelchair person is aboard, they can travel anywhere through all the church facilities. So that pretty much, I believe, covers the site development. We went back and restudied our exterior design to address the comments from the last time. And what we've added and changed is that we've added some siding to the second floor walls, and we've eliminated the canted or sloped pilasters. So we've softened that, and there was some comment last time, although it wasn't written, about possibly giving some variegation to the roof lines, and so we've tried to address that to give a little interest to the roof. So that's, and we've introduced a open railing rather than a solid, more of a solid railing we had in the other design.
Okay, I'd just like to go down these items here. You have photographs of the surrounding properties. This is number one of the motion.
We did not submit that. We provided a context plan that I don't have a copy of it here. I believe Dan has it.
Okay, so we have to repeat number one. And the board expressed concerns with the number of modifications. Have we been able to reduce any of the requested modifications? So
We did eliminate the request for a modification that would related to the trash enclosure, which
And-
would have been a side yard setback one.
And how was that?
And we actually did pull some parking out of the front yard setback as well. This trash enclosure had been over in this area, and there had been a request for a mod for that. But we really can't reduce any of the other mods because we've got to find someplace for our bike parking for the church. And because this is a commercial or non-residential use, the setbacks are much greater in R2 for this use, and so there really isn't a better location for the bike parking because it's required for the church, not for anything else, than right here because of the ramping and everything that's going to have to be provided. So that was a bit of a challenge. And then we have the request for the mod over here to allow these two parking spaces to encroach further into the setback than is normally required for a non-residential use.
No.
So I think we've reduced them as much as we possibly can, given the fact that it's an R2 site.
Okay. Can you show where we've add additional windows to the living room and consider eliminating the plaster box out pattern.
Yeah, well, that's, I discussed that
Right.
before, the plaster, the dominant feature we had before. We've added, actually, 2 additional windows to the living
living room
and dining
unit.
area. There's a sliding door that takes you to the patio, both from the bedroom and the kitchen area. So we have fenestration here and fenestration there. Good cross ventilation here, also with the bedrooms. Good cross ventilation.
So what we like to see is what we look at neighbor-wise here and neighbor-wise there, while we've increased the
These are windows to the living space.
Right.
And these are windows to the bedroom.
Okay. Likewise here again.
So here's,
Okay.
this will probably help some. So these are actually photos of the church property, but here is what we're looking at. There's some vegetation along the backside there. Appears to be there's a hedge right along there,
Yeah.
and heavily planted along this side. So the windows are here and here, and I think this is a single family,
Single family.
and that's as well. But then they're surrounded by multiple family units as well across the street here. This is actually a housing authority project here.
So this will look down on this backyard right here. Okay, I just okay see the concept. Okay, so I'd like to. We have a speaker. Is that you have any landscape design to present or
Yeah.
any other portions of the project?
These are all, everything you see here is new. The hedge that runs along here, we're hoping to maintain that. The church wishes to maintain it, the hedge that runs here. This new fence will be developed here on this property line. New trees will be introduced in the existing planting area, and feature trees within the courtyard, the motor court area.
Okay, is that a handicap? That's just a walking pattern?
Well, it's a painted striped area to have kind of a safe alerting of people using the trash,
Okay.
you know, the residents within.
Is this a handicap spot here?
Yeah.
And that's there. Okay. Okay. We have a speaker. You filled out a form, Bill?
What? No, that's me. I'm the speaker.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we don't have any other.
No speakers.
Okay. So I'll close public comment and bring it back to staff. This one.
For public comment, we do have one letter in opposition from Paula Westbury.
Thanks very much. And then I'll bring it back to the board for questions. Gary? For questions? Okay, I'll start that end. Chris, you have questions?
Couple of questions. The existing, are you proposing to change any of the existing street trees, or have you looked in to see if there are requirements for street trees on this lot?
No, we haven't
No
been told
changes.
that there's a requirement for street.
Okay. And then, but you are looking into the SWMP, the drainage
Yes.
for the BMPs
Right.
and all that good stuff. And that'll
Thoroughly
be-
gone through the drainage aspect.
Okay, and that'll be in your final plans, what you're proposing for that?
Yeah.
It looks like you've shown a
Well,
couple little areas where you're going to have detention basins of some sort. Is that what these dotted lines represent?
On the landscape plan, yes. To be highlighted, I don't know.
I think that's what this is denoting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
okay. And then, do you have a landscape architect involved with the project that will be submitting with final, for the final plans?
The church and I are working together on that.
Okay.
We don't have a separate.
I see. Okay, and those are my questions.
Clay, questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My questions are primarily going to be related to the mods, just because I haven't seen this before and I just want to understand it. So, based on what I've understood thus far, there's a parking modification because it's low-income housing or affordable housing. Sorry.
Actually, the mod relates to the overall total parking, but yes, it's because it's low-income
You're
senior
asking for an
housing.
exception because
yes,
of
exactly.
the
So we're asking to meet the ITE demand rather than to meet the required zoning ordinance parking because there's a crossover only for 2 hours on Sunday. Otherwise, there'll be plenty of parking on the site.
I get that. The outdoor living space mod, that's not for the units themselves, it's for
It's because we're in an R2 zone.
the
and
1,250.
Right, so we don't have enough space to meet the R2 zone open space requirements, but because this is sort of designed like an R3 project, we're asking that those open space standards apply for those residential units.
I'm just going through these because I want to make
Sure.
sure I
Yeah,
got
yeah.
them. The interior setback mod, that's along this side.
I don't think we have that
That's the
anymore.
perimeter
That,
setback.
that one's out.
The interior.
What do we? What's the distance
Two
there?
front
6 feet.
front yard setbacks.
Yeah, well, we have a request for the mod here for the parking.
Adding the parking. Okay.
For the bike parking, and then these two parking spaces encroach into the
And
front
those two are
yard.
new.
And they have been there all along.
They're already there.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
That's what I was trying to get from the
Yeah.
aerial. Okay. I think those are my questions at the moment.
Thanks. Thanks, Clay. Paul?
Continuing with the parking, you actually comply with the parking demand study that was done. What was the actual number of parking spaces that was on the property when it was a church versus the number being proposed? Is there more than
There's
previous?
more now. There's 21 before.
There's 21 before, and how many are you proposing now?
That's 19. Right here.
24.
That's required. We're
21.
providing 21.
Yeah, it's the same.
So you have a total of existing parking stalls are 23, and we're going to be providing 21, so we have less.
So you have less. Before it was 23, and now you're doing 21?
That's correct.
Okay. And now you're providing handicap spaces? How many do you have to provide when you do a lot of 21 spots?
1.
We only have, well, we're providing two. We're providing one for the residential uses, and we're providing one for the church.
Okay. I guess where I was going with it is I thought this church, based upon the size of the parking lot, would require 2 handicap parking spaces, but it only requires 1?
It's
believe
less than
that's-
25, yeah.
Less than 25 spaces?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the handicap ramp that you have in the front, you designed this as a 1 to 12 versus 1 to 20
Yeah.
ramp? So, okay, just so it is as steep as it can be? Because 1 to 12 is when a handicap ramp is. You don't have it with no handrails or something like
No,
that.
we are planning handrails.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's all my questions.
Okay, thanks. Gary?
Just one question: the size of the tree that you're going to remove for the you're going to, I guess, for putting those walls up, the 3'6" decorative walls.
Yeah, over on
The
the
16
voluntary
inch.
side?
16.
What kind of tree is
The
that?
pepper?
It's a pepper tree.
Thanks. I don't have any additional questions. Yeah. I think all the questions were asked already. Okay, so I'm going to bring it back for comments, and I'll start with Chris on your side.
Question for Tony. For a project of this type, is it required that there be a landscape architect involved?
Let me look at our licensing requirements.
Okay. So I'll continue my comments while you're doing that. I guess part of my concern was that I think the landscape plan could be developed a little bit more. We're kind of using, one or two ground covers throughout, and I think there are areas, especially along Voluntario Street, where we just have one solid mass of ground cover. And after looking at the pictures in that area, it's a pretty tall building there, so I think some vertical relief would be in order there against that building. Certain accents or some kind of additional medium and higher planting there. Also, the parking strip or the parkway, we're going to need to know what that's going to be. I think currently it's lawn, and that won't be allowed based on the new rules. So we're going to need to know what planting will be proposed for that area.
Chris, is that even if it exists now? You have to tear it out?
My understanding is if you're redoing the whole lot, then you need to bring it up to code. But we can double check that also with Tony. What else did I have? Oh, and in terms of the stormwater management, we have, I don't know if these are proposed to be low areas, depressions, or swales of some sort, but if there are, then we're going to need to utilize plants that can take that sort of condition. Mm-hmm. And these Raphiolepis and the daylilies aren't necessarily appropriate for that. And I'll ask another quick question while Tony's gearing up over there. You said along the south property line you're going to retain the existing hedge?
Along this, yeah.
Yes.
This is existing hedge.
Okay, and then you're also then adding a row of jacarandas through there? Okay. They look kind of close together. I don't have a scale here. It looks like they're maybe 10 feet or less.
What's that?
The spacing on those jacarandas, can you tell me what that is?
A little over 20 feet.
20 feet?
Mm-hmm.
From here to here?
Yeah, this is 20 feet here.
So it's
So
more like,
Maybe
it's
10.
more like 12 or...
yeah.
Yeah, so that's, again, something else to be looked at in terms of what that spacing should be, at least probably 15 feet at the minimum for jacarandas.
See, that's it's almost 20 feet is almost every other.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you could almost take out every other one.
Okay.
Yeah. and show when you draw these in, kind of show the canopy as almost fully grown, so that you know what the spacing should be.
All right.
And Tony, did you have an answer on?
Yes,
The
this
first
project
question.
does require a licensed landscape architect.
Okay. So a lot of those issues will then be resolved once you get a landscape architect involved.
I read in the code where if there was less than 5,000 square feet of landscaping, that it didn't have to be a licensed landscape architect. Is that in the code? Less than 5,000 square feet of landscape.
Well, it says in general, all commercial, industrial, and institutional multifamily projects have to have a licensed landscape architect. But then it says plans prepared by unlicensed persons, that they may prepare landscape plans for project consisting only of landscaping for 5,000 square feet or less. However, the ABR may require a licensed landscape architect to prepare plans for these following circumstances. 1, the unlicensed person's landscape or irrigation plan submittals are determined inadequate or do not meet minimum review standards. And 2, the proposed project involves extensive grading, revegetation, or improvements with unique or sensitive habitats or environments.
What does that mean?
It sounds to me like you need a landscape
I
architect.
think you do, yeah.
Licensed.
Okay.
I mean, you're going to need an irrigation plan also and details and that sort of thing. So maybe it may behoove you to get somebody involved.
Okay. So that's one. So anything else, Chris?
No, I think the other things will be, determined once they get
Once
somebody
they
on
get
board.
the
Yeah,
landscape architect on board, and then we come back with another presentation.
correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Clay?
Mr. Chair, I too feel that a landscape architect would be required on the project of this nature. I've been looking at the previous submittal and the new submittal. I'll kind of come back to that in a minute. I think the problem I'm having is there aren't sufficient photos of the neighborhood to really look at neighborhood context. I think in general, though, that this project having a multi-unit project in the parking lot of the church, in theory seems to be working. It kind of utilizes the site, whereas it's probably underutilized during most of the week, and it happens to be in the back corner away from both streets. So I think the siting of it is appropriate. The things that I'm sort of struggling with are more related to the amount of green space we are losing around the project, and everything is really packed in, which is another reason why I feel like a landscape architect can help really bring this into a successful, cohesive project. In particular, the areas of concern for me are the ADA ramp, the way it switches back, and maybe there's another solution for that. The 2 parking spaces along Voluntario, I think, are fine. They're existing. I think the mod for that is, in my mind, doesn't have any aesthetic impact on the project. But the project, the site itself, I think, really needs to be looked at in terms of greenery and material. The church itself is kind of tired. Could use probably a little bit of updating and cleaning up. But going back to the building in the back, I think the previous proposal had a little bit of design in it, and kind of interesting. And I heard the comments from the board from the previous review. I think the new design is starting to, in my mind, lack some character. And there's just some detailing, the plaster pop out or whatever this Keynote 7 is. It's not on here. It's the old one, the cement plaster box out pattern. I don't quite understand how that works and why it's even in there. And then these tall 2-story columns here. I'm just kind of struggling with how this style, or what this style is in the architecture, and how it relates to, obviously it's not going to relate much to the church, but how it relates to anything in the neighborhood. So I'm still on the fence with the design.
Thanks, Clay. Paul?
I'm going to concur with some of the stuff and just touch upon the landscaping is important just because it'll help tie it in. The hardscape in the front where the handicap ramp is happening, when you get a landscape architect involved, maybe there's a way of introducing some landscape pockets or some more planting to soften it. It's very hard, very harsh. Well, right now there's a nice lawn in the front. So those are design opportunities as well as a challenge that you have in front of you. Something that's gnawing at the back of my head is this the third time we've seen this, or is this just the second? I'll show it to you first. Did we ever have an option in which you showed the corner open this way with the road? Because this is the way you currently have it.
Yeah.
Did you ever come with a design like that? And then we suggested, we told you to turn it this way because this is your stairs going up, and then this becomes the 15 by 15 area.
No, what we had before was, one of the concepts was to have the open space here of the building moved this way.
Okay.
That was-
I guess I'm okay with the layout that you have, the site plan, the way it's being utilized. I'm not going to recommend changing anything. The only concern I had was this west elevation. This is the corner. I'll show it towards the TV camera guy. If this is where the church happens to be located, this unit right here, I'm thinking that on the first floor it should be a solid wall at the patio versus the open pickets because of the amount of the roadway work. Or if it's going to be minor enough, all the other ones being open is fine, but I see, not that you're going to have a lot of zooming cars going through a church parking lot. But that's the one thing that I saw in that one corner, and it's just a comment from one person. If you go to the site plan, it'd be this. Oops.
I'm sorry.
It'd be this wall and this wall here should be solid on the first floor to give this person a little bit more privacy, because there will be vehicles traveling through there.
Could we do that with landscaping as a buffer?
That's how you can come back to it. It's only one comment of, I see how all these other things work, but when you meet with a landscape architect, that's a concern that I had.
Okay. Gary?
Some of the comments last time were pointed towards the columns and increasing or making the massing appear to be too large. And the comments that I'm going to be headed towards are towards that. I still feel that the second story massing really appears to be much larger than the building is because of the covering of all of these porch areas that you have and how you have the gables pointed to that thing. I think our building is looking a lot larger than it needs to be, and that perhaps some of these outdoor areas, these outdoor living areas on the second floor shouldn't be covered. And I think we did lose some architectural character from this, so I'm not really pleased with as Clay made the comments about the columns coming all the way up almost 2 stories and making the perch in these outdoor living areas. I think that the design is not there. The design development of how the building is integrated second floor to first floor is working out. One of the things I remember from last time, the plaster detail that you have here, this plaster plus relief, isn't really working for me either as far as the character goes and the style. So in my mind, it still needs some major work towards how these areas are brought to reduce down the mass, bulk, and scale. I'd like to see what the other board members feel about the massing.
I'll first touch on, I want to re-emphasize, I really think you really need a landscape architect. I think with the encroachment of all of this hardscape into what was more of a green space, and the fact that this is raised to get up to the door, all of this raised area here, I think because we have lost all of that open green, I think we really need a landscape architect to try and give that site a little bit more than it had before, and with this change. So I want to reinforce that fact. The other is I think that first to begin with, if I'm correct, and these elevations here are not the ones that are in this set.
Well, the windows are not. This was the final that was submitted as a final. The elevations that you were looking at are the final placement of the windows. This is just for color.
This is just color.
Yeah, right.
So these are the elevations here
exactly.
that we should be looking at more than anything else. And when you first brought this, my recollection of seeing it the first time was that even though those elements that you had seemed to be overly large, the building, as Clay said, it had a character to it. It was a style that you were after. It had a strength and this elevation looks to me to be very flat, very slightly nondescript, and I like Gary would like to see it take a turn where there are some elements in it that start to maybe lighten up the upper story a little bit, but some other design elements that make it stand out a little bit from it being less flat. I just think it's plain, but it's not totally without a character by itself, the way it is designed now. But I just think that where you came from was a stronger position, and it's kind of gotten weak. And the top now is just a mirroring of the base, and it just goes straight up, and it doesn't have like a feeling of the bottom being a foundation and the top being a little bit lighter. It just goes up straight right now. So
Well, I'm confused. I feel I've gone backwards.
For me, I mean, I just think it needs some lightening up or studying of the maybe the pickets or something like that to give it a little bit more character on the lightness. I mean, I think if the other board members are comfortable with it, it's it could be all right. I just feel it lacks a little.
Well, would you suggest we go back to the tapered column?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah. Paul, see what you could.
Two comments. One is that the architecture I'm not too focused on because I understand this is an affordable or low-income project, so I'm not really looking at it with the same set of intensity as other projects would be. So that's my first comment about the tapered columns. I do agree with Gary if the second floor decks had a flat roof on it or were trellis with a really low pitch on it, that would bring down the mass in the corners, and that's just a little fine tuning that can happen. That would break up this element, then you'd go up, and then you could break down. So I want to say that there's opportunities to massage this, and we can encourage, if we think about this being a low-income project and coming up with solutions, we can take the existing shell and we can work with it. From my perspective, I want to check with the board if they think it's okay for it to go through and go to the Planning Commission and get their zoning density approved, because if they can't get the zoning density approved, the architecture is secondary. And the landscaping, we know that can be solved, and the architecture needs attention, but that's another secondary, provided they get the zoning density approved.
That sounds reasonable to me.
Mr. Chair, can I
Yes,
ask a
please.
question? And this is really on your behalf. So, because I wasn't at the last meeting, so I don't know what the discussion was about the previous design. So, were the three of you here?
I was here.
I was, but
Okay. The only comment I heard that was sort of relative to the old design was the two-story column.
Yeah.
Was one of the comments that got in the minutes. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Building mass aside, and given that this is affordable, I've been just looking at this, and it could be the way it's drawn versus hand versus CAD, but there's actually something kind of nice about the tapered column look. This has a little bit more craftsman feel, and I think the things that the railing and the tapered column and some of the detailing around this upper porch is completely lost in the proposal. So at the risk of overstepping what was already determined with the board and telling the architect to go back, I think I would like to know from the board what specifically was the direction from this last design. Here, we'll put it up there if you like. That has had the project really go in the direction it is, because I don't think anybody on the board currently is, no offense, are too flattered with the current proposal in terms of the style. And I think at least that proposal, with the tapered columns alone, gave it some sort of, in like Paul said, keeping it simple and in the affordable housing component, it gave it a little bit of design style. And so I'm a little bit leaning more towards what was happening before, because I think it was going in the right direction. But if there was something else that was overreaching, that was, we hated the columns, therefore that got in the minutes, and I would hope that the three of you would maybe intimate that. But or is it just there was a comment about the columns and the massing, and it got interpreted into what we see today?
I believe that's what got interpreted. Right. Because Don was talking about the columns.
It was Don, Sherry had a concern, and also a concern having to do with like this area here where their stairs went up, and I think there were two columns happening right over there where the stairs go up, that this is kind of like a wing wall or something, and that's where this became like a plane with the stairs behind it. And so it was more of the heaviness that was happening with the columns.
Okay.
And that's how...
I'm just trying to understand the comment, because I see a little bit more design aesthetic happening in the previous design. Not that should be the end-all, but I just wanted to understand what the comments were, so...
Yeah, and I think that's right. I think overall, I agree with you. It has a little bit more style. There's a style that is chosen, but I think that what we're seeing is that it also can be less heavy. The building is just looking too heavy, and that comes back to even the present review. What's presented underneath here, where we commented on opportunity to possibly make the porches a little bit lighter. So things like when you have this shadow line out here, where was that floor coming over that floor extends over the...
It's a box out. This is a box out.
Right, and that doesn't happen on the new one, right?
Yes, it does.
Oh, so it's just not...
Well, it's not, you don't see the shade of shadow on it. But this definitely is a different plane.
And what is the distance in that plane there? What is the difference, the differential?
2 inches.
Or just 2-inch box out? And you see, to me, that's sort of the things that are making the top portion here just feel that much heavier.
We haven't lost that portion of it.
Mr. Chair, I do believe that we did have comments that from the last time about the massing, about how heavy the top was. It didn't get incorporated probably to the minutes properly, but massing was still mentioned in the minutes. And I think that's the direction, at least my thought process went, that it wasn't completely developed from our first go-around. And although I understand Paul's comment about wanting to move it forward to Planning Commission, I just hate to see something get a second review, go to Planning Commission, then come back and say, well, we've already approved this direction, and we've already sent him to the direction that we're going, when, to be honest with you, I'm not comfortable with the second story. I'm comfortable with how big the rooms are, how big the buildings are, but I just think that there's architectural things that can be to bring that in, to bring the building in smaller. I'm not talking about plate heights, I'm not talking about ridge height, but I am talking about how things are projected out towards the end, how linear the thing is, and the columns still are not that well resolved. Somehow I don't believe that this project, ground floor columns coming all the way up to the second floor, is the right process for this design.
So are we telling him the size of the units are okay?
I'm okay with the size of the units. I'll just say that.
I think the mass bulk and scale of the building itself is fine. I think it's refining the roof areas over the patios on the second floor. And I think that if I can go to the floor plan on the proposal, the current
proposal.
Well, I can see it here. I think this wall here at the stairs, which is what you said Don was bringing up, I don't think that's successful. And this here, these columns aren't really columns. They're
box outs.
They're box outs. They're fake. And I think this area of the project really needs to be restudied. And I think fixing the roof areas over the trellises, maybe breaking down these corners, at the second floor is going to help with the general boxy shoeboxness of the project. But I think these sort of 6-inch faux columns that in elevation read like a column, but they're not. And this thing and then this wall here, I think needs to be just, this could probably go away. That whole wall could probably go away, and you could really open it up a little bit more. And that would reduce mass.
I think those are good comments. Are we happy with this overhang?
Overhang's not killing anything.
It's fine. One of those on a plan on board. You have plaster up here, a board, and or a skirt. Then you got your wood siding above it.
So perhaps what we could do here is we could send them on to Planning Commission with some comments that are positive about the size of the structure, but we would like to see some refinements in the architectural elements that could visually lighten the building. And specifically, we'd be looking in this area with the columns, and we're looking to the patio areas where roof elements could possibly help lighten the upper structure. How do we feel about that? Yep.
Mr.
Okay.
Chair. I'm just noticing from a survey that was done in August of last year that the parking lot is actually encroaching toward the street. I believe it was said that it's not getting any further toward the street, but it does necessitate removal of that pepper tree. And I can share the survey if you didn't get one in your packet.
The removal of a pepper tree, a nice pepper tree.
Here's the pepper tree here, and I think they showed on the first page.
So it does shift a little bit towards here.
Yeah, this is the existing.
16-inch pepper.
What's the scale on that?
20 of
It's
them.
1 inch and 10 feet.
10.
So it's a 30-foot setback required there, Dan, is that right?
It's 15.
It's 15, okay, from here. So it meets it now.
So this is 15 here, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it meets it now, and it stays there. It doesn't move.
No, but
Yeah?
no, it does. It
Oh,
does
it's 'cause-
encroach
oh,
5
then it
feet
goes-
in.
goes-
It does
goes
move
in.
5 feet closer, I believe.
Yeah.
Let me look. Can we see that site plan?
To adjust the parking a little bit.
Yeah, to increase it. I think that's right.
But that's what you applied for already. I mean,
Yeah, we
this,
did
this
apply
is
for that,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But we're going to lose that
10.
tree that was right there.
yeah. So we did move out Clay 5 feet. I started to look at that, and it looked very funny to me out here. So this is the required.
So these two parking spaces.
The required setback's 15, and we're at 10.
So we're 5 feet into the.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Any further comment on that revelation, or? Okay, then we're good for a motion. And I open to a motion. This would be passing it on to Planning Commission.
I'll float a motion, or I'll make a motion, sending the project on to the Planning Commission, then returning back to full board, with the applicant studying the architectural roof plan and reducing the roof elements over the second floor outdoor living spaces. The applicant studying the stairs going to the second floor and removing the plasters at the sides of the stairs. On the correct. I mean, just study it and come up with a solution there. Applicant to provide a landscape plan and a hardscape plan. In particular, study, or not even use study, find opportunities for planting along the front elevation, or the front along Mason Street. And then I would say also, before going to Planning Commission, to have the street tree committee review the removal of that pepper tree and get the requirements of the replanting.
So first, do I have a second?
Mr. Chair, if your board is forwarding this off to the Planning Commission, we request that you complete the compatibility analysis before doing so.
Okay. Project does fully comply. Well, the applicant is asking for 3 waivers in addition to the modification for the parking and the bike parking along the front. The compatible architectural character is on its way. The board is still reviewing the exterior architectural details, and the applicant understands that we have some concerns about the detailing.
So it's not,
It's appropriate for the size, bulk, and scale, the massing, and the square footages. The board does not have a concern with that. There's no adjacent sensitive landmarks. Public and private views is not an issue, and the use of open space is provided with a common outdoor living area.
okay, do I have a second? Second, Clay? Oh. Okay. And
Just under discussion.
under discussion, Gary.
On the one comment you said that we're okay with the square footage and the size of the building, but I think that saying that the massing, just remove that portion of it. I'd be more comfortable with the motion because we did
We're okay
ask
with
them-
the square
we did ask-
footages
we're
of the
okay
unit.
with- right.
Yeah.
But the applicant is to study lightening, reducing, refining the overall mass of the structure.
Thanks.
In the second story.
The second floor mass of the structure.
Yeah, that's critical line right in there.
Mr. Chair, under discussion,
Clay.
I'd like to add that the applicant return with plate height elevations, finished floor elevations on the elevation plans when he comes back.
Yep.
And I wanted to comment on the mods. In general, I think the mods pose no aesthetic impacts, and for me, they're supportable.
That's good to have in there. One thing before we vote, what are the plate heights that we're using now?
What are the one?
What are the plate heights?
Oh, they're 9 feet.
9-foot plate heights on both floors.
Yeah.
So,
Also, Mr. Chair, under discussion, in terms of the landscape comment, can you read that back to us, Kathy? I think it was maybe your second or third comment, Paul.
That was, I believe, provide a landscape and a hardscape plan, planting along Mason Street.
Okay. Could we clarify that maybe to say a landscape, we're going to need a landscape plan from a licensed landscape architect?
From a licensed landscape architect for the entire site.
Right. I don't want to limit it to just
No, the
sprucing up
entire
Mason
site,
Street.
but in particular to focus in front of Mason Street. And to tag on to what Clay said about, we find no adverse aesthetic impacts for the mods, provided that there is a quality landscape solution. Or with a quality landscape solution, we find no aesthetic impacts to the requested modifications.
that gets in there, right, Kathy? Okay, great. All those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Against, motion carries. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
So we see you back after Planning Commission.
Thank you for
All right. No problem.
This is this yours?
So item 3, 199 North Hope Avenue. There you go.
Hi.
So while he's setting up, I will read the minutes from the last meeting. Back to full board, resolve the mezzanine storage with staff. If that is a direction the applicant decides to go in or to redesign the architecture to reflect a single-story structure. If the applicant is to continue with the height of the building as proposed, applicant should provide a landscape plan for the adjacent neighbor on the west side. Study the one dormer on the west side. That's it.
All right.
Let's see what you got.
Basically, what we did is we went to the one-story architecture,
Okay.
studying the need of the heights with the maintenance people there. Found that we could reduce it down to one story. This is the existing, as you recall, and then we just went to a simple one story with a small monitor for circulation. And we do have a going back to the floor plan, we have the replacement of a kitchen and shower and lockers downstairs and storage over the top here, and the rest is just the volume of that building space. Showing the section through here of how that happens. So actually, upon your direction, I think we looked at it and probably lowered it, basically, and find that it could work.
What's the Tony? You have the drawings from the previous. So the existing building is what height?
It's about 50. It's this height, about
14 feet.
14 feet.
And we're going to 24 feet 6 inches.
Right.
Okay. So the last one was 28 feet. Okay. Okay. All right. Continue. Sorry.
The same materials are, replacement of a metal rigid frame building with a new rigid frame building to meet their needs and a little higher volume of the building. But look at the minimum height and they can do it with this height. And that's basically it. We do have the landscape plan that you asked for to screen the adjacent house.
This is the house in question, and that's not a very good representation. I just stood here and eyeballed, but that's basically where it is, pretty close to the proximity. And then there's the property line,
right? And
there's another one there,
right?
And so this dash symbol is the existing. So there's a lot of material packed in along here.
Yes.
And then there's some big multi-trunk eucalyptus, and then more back to more dash symbol. Mm-hmm. And there's also 4 pine trees along here, pretty big, like 30-inch, 24, and then there's like this 8-inch one that's pretty close to the building. So I'm proposing to take that out, mm-hmm. and then come in with California Bay is a native tree, and there's quite a bit of shady material. So this is there's a big tree mast here on the southwest side.
Right. This is the only opening right
here.
Yeah.
So we need a tree that's kind of going to perform in sort of a shady environment. So I picked California Bay 1, 2, 3, 4 times, and then I've also got a couple of oaks that I thought we'd kind of turn loose and provides a little bit of habitat. And then we've just got a western redbud at each corner, and then we've got a little bit of just a tough Raphiolepis, just shrub to kind of just provide for landscape where we can get it, because of course these are roll-up doors. So and we thought not about vining. It's a utility building. It's mechanical. They call it a shop.
Okay.
So not get too cute. It is screened off pretty well from the cemetery itself.
Right.
And then just a little bit of native planting around. There's a slope here, a little bit of Catalina, ribes, and then a few Laurus nobilis to try and help that guy. So that's it. And then I've got a second sheet that's irrigation, 1 new valve, and then some notes for the contractor.
Okay, great. I'll bring it back to public comment. No speaker slips, and then bring it back to staff. Public comment.
Yes, we have a public comment letter in opposition from Paul Westbury.
Thanks very much. I'll bring it back to the board for questions. Gary?
it's kind of gotten itself, it's different now. The door locations are different.
Paul?
No questions.
Ms. Clay?
He's out.
Quick question I have. It looks like you're trying to. Obviously, this is a high fire zone. Is that right?
Well, is it high fire?
I don't know if it's high fire zone.
I put a note on there that I would like them to look at this mass back here.
Okay. And it's a metal building, so.
Yeah, but it's pretty thick.
Okay.
It gets pretty hot in there, so that's why they want to have a lot of doors, almost a pavilion effect during the day. And then you got some big equipment sitting there, however they want to store in there, and it gives some flexibility of which equipment to store.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. And then, so these are vents.
These are vents
Yeah.
for in a hot day when the building they have now is like an oven. It just really builds up a lot of heat. So
Yeah.
you need to get some good breeze ventilation rising and escaping the heat.
Mr. Chair, you have a question.
Yep, go ahead.
Is there a color chart, or did you choose some colors for this?
No, we haven't yet, but we're looking at I think right now it's kind of a gray building. We're looking more towards a green building. They have a standard color charts for these buildings that we haven't brought into you yet. We're planning to bring it into the next phase.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Is there a rationale you're using for the 14-foot plate height?
Well, they need the high doors here, and that's what they needed for the equipment to go in here, and some of it has high backhoe thing that rises up in there to make it work and work on it.
On the inside?
On the inside, right,
I see.
once we get inside.
Okay. All right. Okay, so I'll bring it back to the board then for comments. And Gary?
I appreciate the removal of the dormer. I still think the height is probably a tad too tall, but given the location of this and how it appears from the public, I think I'm okay with the 24-foot height. So I'm ready to see this project move on.
Okay, thanks. Paul? Chris? It's comment?
It was going to be a question that turns into a comment, but I'm wondering, it looks like throughout, Chuck, you're kind of replacing the pittosporum, the myoporum with pittosporum, and leaving the existing. I assume they're all kind of wilting like the rest of them are in town.
Very old.
Okay, so I guess just, I don't know if it needs to be a comment, but just as that happens, it might behoove you to sort of prune up the existing so you get some sunlight into those new
get some notes
pittosporum.
going on that, yeah.
Yeah. But other than that, I think everything looks fine.
Thanks. Okay, I think the other comments are fine. I think in light of the type of equipment that you need to service on the inside, and really the fact that this is really down in a sunken area where the whole rest of the property is up higher, and it has ample screening from the back there. I'm okay with the height myself. So I think we're okay. So I think you'll come back with colors and
Come back with colors. I got to get this into the planning commission, after which then I will come back with a full preliminary package for you.
Okay.
Preliminary approval.
Mr. Chair?
Yep.
I don't know if the architect intends to come back before planning commission submittals, or
Coming back here or
if
after?
not, I think it's important for this board to make comments now on the compatibility of the structure. And one of the concerns I pointed out to the architect was the length of the building also, to make sure that it is getting a little longer, that you still believe it still fits into the site and to the neighborhood from a
I think at
compatibility standpoint.
one time we talked about making it longer. We're not making it longer.
You're not?
No.
Okay.
It's
That's-
exactly the same size building.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's,
I know we talked about
we
making
talked
it
about
longer,
that,
but
okay.
We decided against that, and
But the compatibility criteria should be pointed out now if it's not going to come back before planning commission.
Right. And you're not coming back. You're going to planning commission.
yeah, I want to go to planning commission.
Any comments from any of the board members on compatibility? You okay with it, Gary?
Well, I don't think that there's a lot of buildings that are similar to this and that it is compatible with the neighborhood. However, it's completely disguised you can't see it from any place.
Yeah.
So that's the compatibility is that it's invisible to the general community.
Well, we recognize it's a conditional use permit, so it's in a residential zone parcel, but it is a different use. So that's why they need to go back to the Planning Commission for a conditional use permit amendment. So that it's still a question that it has to be answered.
Mr. Chair, I would say that because they're reusing the same exact existing concrete pad, that it's the same physical footprint. The structure is larger in height due to needs that they have, but due to the existing landscaping that's there, that's mature, as well as the proposed landscaping, that there is no adverse negative impact. It does comply with the solar ordinance for the residential zoning, which is the 30 degrees at 12 feet, and the building is less than 25 feet tall, so if it was a residential structure, it fits within the neighborhood, or it's disguised well in its setting.
I think that's well put.
All right.
Okay. So that being said, I'd open for a motion that would include Paul's comment.
So I'll make a motion to move this on to Planning Commission and return it back to consent with a color board and any other additional Planning Commission requirements, making the compatibility findings for the compatibility of the structure as earlier spoken, the appropriate size because it's under 25 feet and complies with the solar. There's no adjacent landmarks. There's new landscaping being proposed, and there's no public views that relate to the structure.
Thank you, Paul. Do you have a second? Gary for second. No other discussion. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Against? Motion carries. Thank you. So we see you back at consent. Thanks. Oh. Okay, so the fourth and last item of the evening, 220 West Montecito Street.
Good afternoon, Chair.
Hi.
Members of the board.
Yep.
Are there plans and simulations in the package? Because
whatever you give to them should be here.
is there any way I could pull those out?
Yeah, they'll be.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Ryan Shields. I'm here representing the applicant, T-Mobile West Corporation. This is our second presentation here. The first one had a design which was the main purpose here is to try to blend in 3 antenna sectors in the back of the building. The original design had 2 smaller, much smaller massings in the screens, and per direction I came back with kind of these uniform, they're about 28 feet long, screen walls, and I can go to some elevations here.
Tony, do we have minutes? Thanks. So this will be continued indefinitely to full board. The board appreciates the technical difficulties and the criteria involved with the antenna design and find that 2 smaller antenna enclosures is more acceptable than 1 large antenna enclosure. The enclosures are to be more integral to the existing architecture with regard to detailing and location relative to the existing composition. Thank you.
And site plan view, and this is the view kind of along the railroad tracks as well as along 101, which I believe was kind of the most critical view to the board. This is one of the antenna sectors, and these are the other 2. The original design had sort of a chimney-like element over here, and this one, these two were kind of crunched together in a smaller box element. So we stretched these out. They go from the roof deck height of 33 feet up to the top of 43, so it's about a 10-foot tall screen. About 7 feet is visible. There's about a 3 or 4 foot parapet. Length on those is 28 feet, and just to kind of give a little bit of relief there, we've got them set back about a foot or so from the edge of the parapet.
You want to run us through the elevations here?
Yeah. And the architect had played around a little bit with doing some like little boxed-in windows that I think in the end, at least it's my opinion, don't really fit with it. He was trying to break up just sort of some of the solid massing. We've got the roof deck here at 33, and then there's about 7 feet above that for the antennas to make a setback requirement to have the signal propagate out over the parapet. There'll be some 2 access doors. One is right here, and those will be flushed in with just a little bit of relief there. And this view, which would be looking like, let's say, from Montecito Street, most likely you're only going to see maybe the top foot or two just due to the angle from the street level, because it is set back probably 25 feet from the face of the building. The building itself has got quite a bit of different elements going on, from these column elements. There's some wood trellising. We played around a little bit with that on top of here, and in the end we thought that just sort of a plain screen sort of worked out the best.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no one in the audience for public comment, I bring it back to staff. Staff, do we have any public comment?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have a letter in opposition from Paula Westbeer.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Paula. And I bring to the board for questions. I'll start with Gary.
No questions.
Paul? Clay?
Can you reread the comments from last time?
Item 1.
So the board appreciates the technical difficulties and the criteria involved with the antenna design, and find that 2 smaller antenna enclosures is more acceptable than 1 large antenna enclosure. The enclosures are to be more integral to the existing architecture with regard to detailing and location relative to the existing composition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question for the applicant. How did you address those 2 comments?
Well, the original design that was here first actually had 2 much smaller elements, and what I took away from the meeting was to sort of make those more linear and less kind of chimney-like. So we stretched those out. Unfortunately, and I was trying to explain this when we were here, it's pretty difficult to get the engineering requirements of the radio frequency engineers and the structural integrity of the building to all sort of mesh happily and in turn have it look pretty. So we stretched out these elements along the back to get the antennas to where they needed to be, and other than going directly on the face of the building, we set it back a little bit to give a little bit of relief there.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Chris?
Are there details in here of the actual antennas, like what the size and?
The site plan is probably the best way to look at those. Three groups of 4 antennas.
And what's the height on those?
They're a little over 4 feet.
Okay.
And the width is right around a foot to 16 inches.
And so I guess my question would be, if they're only 4 to 5 feet, why did you go 10 feet on the...
You have to, as the signal leaves the antenna face, it does a little dip down, and when you've got a parapet on a building, it'll dip and hit the parapet, and then the signal is basically...
So you're actually elevating...
Exactly. You need to have an elevation, and the further we go back into the center of the building, the higher the antennas need to be. And there's sort of a tower element in the front of the building, and we had looked at incorporating the antennas in there, but we had to get more of like a 14-foot height to get that setback, and we laid that out, and it really kind of popped out as kind of a clock tower type of feature rather than, this integral little tower that the way it currently exists.
Okay, that's my question.
Okay, thanks. I have no questions.
Comments?
Comments, Gary?
I find nothing about this proposal acceptable. It increases mass, bulk, and scale. It makes the buildings look huge. It has no architectural character. There's nothing about this proposal that I could remotely be okay with. So the height is too high, the mass is too much, it's just not an acceptable proposal to me. You went the wrong direction.
Paul? Thanks, Paul. Clay?
Nothing additional.
Chris? Okay, I have to say that I agree with every board member. This is one of the buildings that unfortunately is very close to the highway. It's very big and blocky. It's right next to the railroad. It's considered one of those buildings that is in your face when people travel to Santa Barbara. So when they travel here, this is one of the buildings they see, unfortunately, because it's a big, blocky building. It is not a building that really takes huge additions to, or almost any addition. And, you just have a really difficult problem trying to put something up there. So I'm not saying that there's an easy way to do it, but the direction that you've took by adding more mass to the building and having it very plain is definitely a wrong direction. It's also very difficult to say that it's a wrong direction when I can't even give you a direction that's going to take you to the right spot, because this is just not a building that's easy to work with, to do what you're trying to achieve and do it successfully. So I think you're in a really difficult spot, but this proposal is certainly not going to work, and all I could say is I'm sorry, and come again.
Okay.
So, all right, I'm open for a motion. Would this be a deny without prejudice? Is that one of those?
Mr. Chair?
Yep.
I wouldn't recommend a denial unless the applicant asks for a denial.
Oh,
I
that's
think
right,
We
okay.
want to get them to the place where we can have a project so they can return with a different proposal
Sure.
if at possible.
Well, we give you the option. I mean, do you want to leave it open, or do
We
you
might as
want
well
to
leave
deny?
it open. I think that,
Okay.
we're pretty much at a crossroads, engineering-wise, to get the signal to be able to propagate out and meet your criteria. So I think we're probably at an impasse, but that said, as long as we've gone through the effort to get this far, I'd like to keep it open.
Yeah.
Have you consulted with the original architect who did the building?
Yeah, actually the first design was his design that you guys looked at. So.
Okay, so can I have a motion to help the applicant?
I've done 2 motions. I'm going to take a break.
Gary?
Yeah, I'll make a motion for an indefinite continuance back to full board. The applicant is to come back with a completely revised plan that does not
increase the height or increase the height of the intent of the existing building, and does not appear to be massive in scale as the proposed project does. I'm not going to give you any suggestions on how to do this. We'll just leave it at that.
Thanks. Do I have a second? Second by Clay. Under discussion, I'd like to add, Gary, if, and any addition to the building should be appropriate to the architecture in scale.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. Okay, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Against, motion carries. Thank you very much. And with that, I'd like to conclude the agenda for this evening, August 9th, 2010. Good night, Santa Barbara.